Welcome. My name is Tamara Curwood. I'm currently a student at Northwest Christian University, and this is my capstone project. Our capstone project was to complete an action research project, and being a primary teacher, I have conducted a classroom action research project in my own classroom for the purpose of improving the practice of teaching. I have been a primary teacher for 16 years. During that time, I've taught in kindergarten and in first grade. I'm also a mom of two young boys, ages 5 and 6, and I'm particularly interested in this topic of technology and early learning as a teacher and as a mom. I have seen how technology both motivates and teaches children, and also I like to focus on the early academic success. So in this classroom action research project entitled iPad and Multimedia Instruction in Kindergarten, I will be looking at how technology can help improve both our teaching and our students' learning. I hope you enjoy. Why did I research this area? Well, there are quite a few reasons why I decided to research using iPads in the classroom. The first one was I wanted to learn what role technology plays in the classroom. I have seen the benefits of incorporating technology in the classroom both for myself and for my students, and I wanted to explore this further. Also, technology continues to advance and change the way we teach and our students learn. So I believe that it's important that we're at the forefront of what is out there and how can it best be used in our classroom. It's also important that we need to integrate technology like iPads and multimedia in our classrooms in order to document their impact. This is a new area, and research is relying on us to start to see how this technology can improve our teaching. Second of all, I wanted to research this area to find a way to improve early numeracy scores. This was one of my teaching goals this year, to improve my early numeracy scores as measured by Ames Web benchmarks, and this was my need, and so it was established, and this research project came about, and it includes methods used to meet these goals. Finally, I wanted to find out how technology influences student motivation and engagement in early mathematics. I know that students are highly motivated to use technology. They come in to kindergarten very familiar with it, and this project will help me document by observations and interviews the impact that technology can have. I began this action research project by conducting a literature review on what was already out there as far as using iPads in the classroom. Three trends that I found from my literature review include the following. First, I found that there are documented positive effects of using iPads in the classroom. Research listed both positive student effects and positive teacher effects. First, in looking at positive student effects, iPad apps extend capabilities of students. They provide drill and practice. They deliver content, allow students to be creative, to be engaged, and to extend their learning. Technology also enhances higher level thinking skills and problem solving. It allows for students to collaborate, and it increases their perseverance when solving problems when they're able to do that in a fun way with technology. As far as positive teacher effects, iPads in the classroom provide resources for teachers. They provide us with apps that help us manage data, customize instruction for individual students. Apps focus on beginning concepts. They allow our students to practice basic skills, to introduce new content, and to provide immediate feedback and success. We're also able to engage our students in real world learning. Teachers can reinforce learning and provide educational gains quickly. Also, we can positively impact our class culture. With iPads and iPad use, there is more interaction between our students, cooperation, and creativity. Another trend that I found in my literature review was that in order to implement iPads, to be successful and to address gains in student learning and achievement, there are some certain conditions that we want to follow. First, we need to carefully select our iPad apps. We need to provide different learning strategies and results, including apps that tutor, explore, allow students to use them as tools to communicate and to collaborate. Also, we need to integrate iPad learning within our content areas such as mathematics and to provide students and teachers with training and support. It's important that we use iPads as learning tools, but also to focus on our students using them as creative projects and ways to build their own learning and curriculum. As teachers, we need curriculum and instructional materials that match and that are targeted, and we also need ongoing professional development. Finally, multimedia instruction addresses different learning styles. And when we implement these, we are providing opportunities for our students for different thinking, exploring, cooperation, active engagement, and frequent feedback. Finally, the third trend that I found from my literature reviews were that mathematics and iPads have a strong connection. There are many benefits to using iPads in math and mathematics. Apps can be customized to instructional levels. You can focus on beginning concepts involving number sense. Apps can help determine levels of our students, provide rote practice of basic skills. Math apps provide ways for students to explore and practice computation. Standards for math and technology cite using technology as an integral part of fostering early math and creating foundations and opportunities. Apps allow our students in mathematics to explore, to think, to practice early numeracy skills, to actively be engaged, to participate in group, and to have frequent interaction with other students and teachers, and to get feedback, immediate feedback. All of these things are great for early math practice and foster early success. Focus questions of my study. First of all, my research addressed the problem of how to improve early numeracy scores and foundations in kindergarten. My primary research question is as follows. In what ways will iPad and multimedia instruction improve students' achievement in early numeracy at the kindergarten level? I also had a secondary research question. How does iPad and multimedia instruction influence student motivation and engagement in early mathematics? I will be looking at both of these questions throughout my project. My hypothesis for this action research project is that students who participate in iPad and multimedia instruction will increase their scores in early numeracy. What is early numeracy? Early numeracy instruction is the ability to reason and apply simple numerical concepts. Early numeracy can be taught in many ways and includes many areas of beginning mathematics. Early numeracy measures included in this study included counting, number identification, quantity discrimination, and missing numbers. I will show you an example of each of these measures on the next two slides and explain them. For this action research project, I used Ames Web early numeracy measures in each of the areas of early numeracy. The first example here to the left is an example of the oral counting measure. These are timed, all of these measures are timed for 1 minute, and this first one is an oral counting measure where the students simply need to count as far as they can in a 1 minute time frame. To the right There is an example of the number identification measure. In this measure, students have 1 minute. They start at the top and they need to identify by name each of the numbers and get as many as they can in a 1 minute time period. Two additional Ames Web measures that I used were quantity discrimination, which is the QDM, and the missing numbers measurement, which is the MNM. First, we'll look at the QDM, or the quantity discrimination measure, on the left side of the page. It's a 1 minute time to test. The students start at the top, and you'll notice that there are two numbers in each box. The student has to identify which number is larger in each box and say the name of that number. The right measure, missing numbers, is also a 1 minute measure. The kids start at the top of the page and they have to fill in the number that is missing in each box. Notice that sometimes the number will be missing at the beginning or in the middle or at the end of the sequence. It is simply their job to say the name of the number that is missing. Action research study methods. The problem that I was trying to solve was, how will I go about improving early numeracy scores in my classroom? In order to address this problem, I collected multiple data sources and used reliable methods. I would like to introduce you to my participants. My participants included my kindergarten class of 2012-2013 at Central Point Elementary, located in Central Point, Oregon. This particular class last year had 21 boys and 21 girls. Out of the 42 students, 3 of them were identified as ELL, and 6 had either speech or communication IEPs. The data collection that I used included 3 different methods, including Ames Web Early Numeracy Standardized Test, use of observational data, and group interviews. My methods were to use targeted iPad apps and multimedia to instruct my students in early numeracy. I focused on oral counting, number identification, quantity discrimination, and missing numbers. This was a 5-week intervention. My students and I participated in these activities 3 days per week for 20 to 25 minutes. In week 1, we focused on oral counting apps and multimedia counting songs and videos. Week 2, we focused on number identification apps and multimedia. Week 3, we focused on quantity discrimination apps and multimedia. Week 4, missing number apps and multimedia. And week 5, we reviewed all 4 early numeracy skills. I administered Ames Web Early Numeracy Test in March as a strategic whole class summative assessment to measure whether interventions had had an impact. Listed here are some of the iPad apps and multimedia experiences used during this intervention, including apps, songs, electronic books, and videos used during our 5-week project. Triangulation of data. For this action research project, I collected and analyzed multiple forms of data to measure the effectiveness of iPad and multimedia interventions. It's important to triangulate our data in an action research project in order to increase validity and the trustworthiness of our research. It also helps to inform our own practices as teachers. Is what we're doing working? I looked at 3 forms of data. First, inquiry data included my student interviews. Second, I used observational data, field notes that I took during our iPad time and photographs of the students participating in iPad activities. Finally, I collected artifacts, which were both formative and summative assessments, including the Ames Web early numeracy measures used in January and in March. Pre and post intervention data for my class. Let's take a look at the table. Going down the first column, we have my students' numbers there. Then going across, you'll see winter OCM, winter NIM, winter QDM, and winter MNM. Winter is my pre-intervention or my baseline data that I used before I started this action research project. Then going across, you'll see the March scores for each of the 4 measures: March OCM, March NIM, March QDM, and March MNM. These scores were after or post-intervention. Each of the 4 measures are identified on the key. Again, OCM is oral counting measure, NIM is number identification measure, QDM is quantity discrimination measure, and MNM is missing number measure. The table has also been color-coded for your convenience and ease of looking at scores to compare. You can see that for student 1, for example, for their winter oral counting score, they had a score of 56. And then if you look across at the next red score, that would be their March score after the intervention, they were able to count to 90. And then again, going through, the purple scores would be the number identification, where that student had 37 in the winter. After the intervention, they actually went down to 25. For quantity discrimination, we'll look at the blue scores. They had a score of 18 before the intervention and a score of 24 after. And then the green scores show our missing number measures, where they had a score of 13 before and a score of 9 after. It was my goal at the end of my intervention to increase my overall student achievement for each of the measures, and we'll take a look at how my students did on the next page. Pre and post intervention data for my class. This is continued from the previous slide with my second half of my students listed, again with 41 students total that participated in these measures. The key remains the same and the table remains the same. I'd like to look at how my students did. When I looked at the overall student achievement for each of the measures, the number of students that either stayed the same from their winter to their March scores or made gains, which is what I wanted, this is how they did. First of all, in counting, oral counting measure, 36 out of the 39 students that took both measures, both in January and in March, 36 out of 39 either stayed the same or improved. That's 92% of my students that made gains or stayed where they were and didn't lose anything. In number identification, 34 out of 39 students, that's 87% of my students, made gains or stayed the same. In quantity discrimination, 38 out of 39 of my students, that's 97% of my students either stayed the same or made gains. And in missing numbers, 29 out of 39 stayed the same or made gains. That's 74% of my students. Let's look at this in the form of a graph. Pre and post intervention class averages. This graph shows the information I just shared with you about how my students did overall. That was determined by coming up with averages for each of the 4 measures. What I did was the graph shows that I took an average for their winter scores in OCM, which is oral counting measure, and then I also took their average for how they did post-intervention in March for OCM. And there you can see the bar graph. They definitely either stayed the same or made great improvements in counting. For number identification, I did the same. I took an average of their winter scores and then their March scores, and that also shows improvement. Quantity discrimination shows improvement, and missing number measure also shows slight improvement. So, very happy with my overall pre and post intervention class averages, especially with the post intervention averages, and that they made some great gains. This graph shows a select group of students and how they did with the interventions. It's entitled Impact of Strategic Support Program. This graph shows the number of students who were at strategic at winter benchmark. It also shows the number of those students who ended up making their spring target. Strategic support included targeted iPad and multimedia numeracy interventions. The key explains the four measures. Strategic students are those students that AIMSweb identifies as neither intensive but nor have they met their benchmark yet. They're there in the middle and need extra support, so by the end of the year they can make their targets. I chose to focus on this group to see how iPads and multimedia impacted their ability to make that goal at the end of the year. So you can see there on that's the number of students on the side, and then the measures going across the bottom. So for oral counting, 21 out of 23 strategic students in the winter ended up meeting their spring goal for counting. So again, they started out as strategic in the winter, and 21 out of 23 ended up finishing by meeting their benchmark for counting. So that's fantastic. For number identification, 16 out of 23 of those students ended up meeting their number identification goal. 21 out of 23 met their quantity discrimination goal, and 17 out of 23 met their missing number goal. Observational data, field notes for my first group. I have 3 different groups of students in my classroom. So here are the notes that I took down during iPad and multimedia numeracy instruction. They're the observations that I made of my students while they were participating in the interventions. I used these observations to show what kind of learning and involvement my students had. From this data that I recorded, it is evident that the intervention increased student participation and involvement with their learning. For each of my groups, the students displayed excitement and participation during iPad apps, songs, and videos. For example, in this first group, you can see that all 11 of my students were noted as participating, watching the screen, clapping, and counting with the song. Every student was successful with an iPad counting app. Students were noted to be clapping for each other when they successfully answered the questions. All participating students were counting together, and one of my students self-corrected and ordered numbers correctly. Observational data, field notes for Group 2. During iPad and multimedia instruction, the following student observations were noted for my second group of students. All 15 participating students in this group were watching the screen, clapping, and counting with a song. Every student was successful with an iPad counting app. I noted 100% participation while using counting and early numeracy apps. All participating students were counting together. One of my students focused on counting correctly. Students were successful and eager to learn. They were positive, cooperative, and on task. Observational data, field notes for Group 3. During iPad and multimedia numeracy instruction, the following student observations were noted. All 11 participating students were watching the screen, clapping, and counting with the song. Every student was successful with the iPad counting apps. 100% participation was noted with this group also, while using counting and early numeracy apps. All students were participating and counting together. Students were counting fluently and correctly. Counting apps reinforced correct counting and numerical order. Students were observing each other and participating during the 15 to 20 minute intervention times. Counting apps reinforced counting fluently and correctly. Photographs of iPad and multimedia interventions. I have included these as part of my field observations. These photographs show my students participating in the iPad activities and an example of a counting song that we did up on the big screen. Inquiry data, student focus group interviews. I interviewed some of my students from each of the groups in order to measure how iPad and multimedia instruction affected student motivation and engagement in learning. I looked at their opinions, attitudes, and feedback about instruction. I was only able to conduct one round of questions instead of the 2 rounds that I had planned due to time constraints. I used semi-structured interviews in order to ask planned questions and allow for open participation and sharing about their learning experiences. This data helps answer why the interventions were successful and supports other findings of high levels of motivation and engagement as noted in my observational data. The following questions were asked of my students. Tell me about using iPads. What did you like about playing the iPad games? Did they help you learn? Tell me about the counting songs and videos that we played on the big screen. Did you like them? Did they help you practice your counting? What was your favorite song? Did they help you learn your numbers better? Inquiry data, student focus group interviews continued. These are some of the noted student responses that I received when asking them the questions from the previous screen. Student responses. Using iPads in the class was good. I liked playing the games. I liked counting best. They helped me learn and they were fun. I liked the songs and videos and they helped me learn how to count to 100. They helped me learn my numbers better. I learned to be gentle with the iPads. I liked playing games. I like the counting songs. Counting to 100 is quick. Inquiry data, student focus group interviews. Student responses continued. Some additional student responses to using iPads in the classroom included, it was fun learning how to play the games. The games made it easy to learn. iPad games helped me learn and do math. I liked learning with the iPads. I liked everything about iPads. The counting songs helped me learn how to count. My favorite song was the frog song. All of these student responses show the positive feelings and results of using iPads in the classroom. Interpretation of data. This is my overall interpretation of all the forms of data that I collected. The primary research question in my action research study was, in what ways will iPad and multimedia instruction improve students' achievement in early numeracy at the kindergarten level? Analysis of my quantitative data indicates an overall increase in Ames Web scores in all 4 areas of early numeracy. As indicated by the previous tables, the number of students that stayed the same or made gains from pre to post intervention data are listed below. Interpretation of data continued. Again, bearing in mind that my primary research question in this action research study was, in what ways will iPad and multimedia instruction improve students' achievement in early numeracy at the kindergarten level? Analysis of my quantitative data indicates an overall increase in Ames Web scores in all 4 areas of early numeracy. As indicated by the previous graphs, class average scores increased in all 4 areas of early numeracy, with the most significant increase in oral counting. The impact of meeting strategic students' instructional needs was significant. 21 out of 23 strategic students in the winter met their spring goal for counting. 16 of 23 met their number identification goal. 21 of 23 met their quantity discrimination goal. And finally, 17 of 23 met their missing number goal. Interpretation of data, secondary research question. In my secondary research question, I was looking at how iPads and multimedia instruction influences student motivation and engagement in early mathematics. 2 ways that I figured this out was by doing observations of my students using iPads and by conducting focus group interviews. The results are as follows. My observations show why this intervention was successful. iPad and multimedia instruction is highly engaging and interactive, collaborative and successful, promotes motivation for learning and provides immediate feedback, encourages participation and accountability, reinforces concepts learned in class, involves multisensory learning, and scaffolds my students' learning. Additionally, my focus group interviews revealed why this intervention was successful. The student responses showed that iPad and multimedia instruction is fun and engaging, successful, memorable, and effective for teaching math, especially counting. Conclusions. This action research study on iPad and multimedia instruction in kindergarten showed the following themes. First, it showed that early numeracy skills can be positively impacted by incorporating technology into the classroom. There are many positive effects of using iPads in the classroom. To address gains in student learning and achievement, it is important to select appropriate and engaging iPad apps, to integrate iPad apps within content areas like mathematics, and to utilize multimedia instruction. My kindergarten students improved their achievement in early numeracy and showed increased motivation and engagement in early mathematics. Finally, future implications of this study include looking at how to use iPad and multimedia instruction in other content areas, and how to further include technology as a way to improve student learning and motivation. The most important thing learned from my research was that technology proved to be an effective tool for helping my students make important gains in early numeracy. iPads and multimedia instruction are engaging and positive ways for students and teachers to teach and to learn. Future recommendations. The following are some of the future recommendations I would have to other teachers involved in iPad and multimedia instruction and for myself in the future. First, I would need to allow for additional iPad time to begin my math lessons. I needed more time. Next, in order to promote small group and individual practice, additional iPads are needed. I would like to include more iPad and multimedia examples, specifically for identifying numbers, quantities, and missing number sequences. I felt like I had a lot of material for counting and needed to find some additional apps and songs for the other 3 early numeracy areas. I would like to increase the length of this intervention to allow for further observations, focus group interviews, and gathering of additional information. I think it would also be important to schedule these interventions for 5 days per week instead of 3. I would like to include additional interventions for students who are identified as intensive. My intensive students did not seem to respond as well to this intervention. They need increased interventions and time. Finally, I would like to promote iPad and multimedia instruction in various areas of the kindergarten program after seeing the success in early mathematics. Unexpected outcomes from my action research study. All areas of early numeracy were positively impacted by this study, with the greatest increase being in counting. Many students met their spring goals as a result of this intervention. Students that were identified as intensive in the winter were not as responsive to these instructional methods. Intensive students need additional and more targeted support to increase early numeracy scores. Acknowledgements. I would like to thank the following people and organizations who helped make this action research project possible. Central Point Elementary School, my kindergarten class of 2012-2013, kindergarten instructional assistants who helped administer the Ames Web assessments, my principal, Walt Davenport, and Ames Web.